have mentioned this on, it's more, I think, TikTok lives that I've talked about it, but like one of the things I find really interesting in sort of today's culture is this sort of call out kind of thing, call out culture. So again, it depends on what we're calling out. So I'm not anti it across the board, but like this whole putting people's comments on your videos, right? Like little scripture here, and then calling out that person's username and whatever, um, as a point of, well, it seems like it's more ridicule or to defend your position, to put this person on the spot, or whatever the situation might be, right? But again, it gets tricky. So if somebody is doing something that is obviously hurting and torturing other people or whatever the situation might be, obviously, we've got to put a stop to that for sure, right? That can't be allowed to continue, even though a lot of times these things do. But I find in most cases it's like when you start to look at the sort of laws and the themes around manifestation, right? With manifestation, when you want to create something, right? And this is a lot of times used in modifying behavior in general. You don't focus on the stuff that you don't want, right? You don't sit there and focus on, well, I don't like this, I don't want this, I don't want things to be this way. You know what I mean? Because what it does is it sets the frequency. It reiterates the exact thing you don't want to be happening. And that's where your focus is gone now, because it's frustrating. So you're constantly, I guess, hyperfixated or stuck on whatever this is that's irritating you, right? And now that might not seem like a big deal at first, but if that's your focus, if that's where your mind goes, you're going to drive yourself nuts, right? That will take precedent. That will take center stage in your mind. And that thing that you hate now lives rent-free in your brain. Now, the reason why I say this is important, and it shouldn't be the focus, you shouldn't be focusing on what you don't want. You should be focusing on what you do want. But not, again, it's that's where things can get kind of interesting. Not like it's this far away pipe dream that you'll never ever reach, right? That doesn't work either. It has to be thought of like it's just common knowledge. It's what's happening, it's what you're doing. Now, in regards to this point that I'm making, because I know it's not specifically about manifestation, but it kind of is. We each create our own reality. We create our life. We manifest what we have, and what's important to us and what isn't. All this stuff is based on what we spend our time doing, thinking about, surrounding ourselves with, etc., etc., etc. So if your focus is on all the things you don't like you don't like this about this person, you don't like this about this entire gender, you don't like, and look, we're all guilty of it. This is the society we live in, especially now that things are sort of broadcasted all over social media, and they go into trends and whatever, and again, it sort of validates your experiences and your existence, so you jump on the bandwagon because it makes you feel like you're part of something, right? This is the interesting part with human beings as well, because we have these we're sort of anchored, aren't we, into surviving in the group. So there's some of these really, really old survival biological mechanisms to keep our species going. So we kind of want to be part of the club, so to speak. We want to be part of the group, even if what the group is doing is incredibly toxic and isn't beneficial to anyone in the group or anyone that is directed, that hatred is directed at through the group. This is where things can go really, really bad, really, really quickly. And it ends up, initially it's not a big deal. It's just a little poking fun here and there. It's just a little calling out. It's no big deal. But then you have an entire group of people who are now attacking another group of people. And this is where things can get difficult as well. Again, these are all biological mechanisms for survival. But it's this, you're different to me. You're not like my people. right? You're the other, so you need to be shunned because you're a threat to our little club, our little system. Like I said, in past times that might have been true. It might have been important because of, sort of clans, or I mean, we can't even be sure though, can we? But because of clans and trying to gain power and, making sure that, people have resources and all this sort of stuff and ways of surviving, because things are more sparse back then, sparse, whatever you want to say. So it was harder, right? And there were people who would survive and people who wouldn't. This is where it gets tricky because we're not in these circumstances anymore. I mean, by and large, most of the world is not. There might be some places that would definitely still be struggling with resources. But again, that's because of the system. There's definitely enough money and enough resources for everybody. And there are some people who have too many and don't need that much. And then people who don't have any. So it's obvious what would be an easy solution. I don't know if it'd be so easy to carry out, but the idea, the concept is pretty easy, I would think. But again, if your focus is solely on, I don't like this person, I don't like what they're doing, blah, 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 I'm going to call them out. I mean, you may not directly have to deal with that person. I mean, I'm not saying that you won't, because you probably will. But you're going to continue having those types of experiences. And the reason is, when it comes to manifestation, when it comes to co-creating your life, whatever, the universe will back you up on that. Whatever it is that you choose, because the universe is neutral. Now, again, this is sort of headed into potentially religious territory and what certain people believe, right? I'm not here to tell people what to believe, but to me it sort of seems logical, it seems obvious, but maybe that's just my perspective. To me it's obvious that the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, is neutral. It's neutral, because if it was all powerful and all knowing, there wouldn't be things happening the way that they're happening in the world. So it's obvious. It logically, it makes sense that that's not what this is. It's not what it's about. It's a co-creation. So the universe is the energy at which, I guess, supports what our thinking is, what our focus is. And it carries it out based on what we spend our time thinking about, what we spend our time feeling or obsessing over, or whatever the situation is. And you can see that because when you talk to people, right? So people who don't understand this concept, right? They don't understand. And they're not living a life that they want. They're not, right? They're not happy. They have a whole bunch of things they don't want. They do things they don't want. They don't enjoy it. None of it's pleasurable, etc., etc. That person still created that life. That's how I know it's neutral. Because all you have to do is go back, if the person's going to be honest, go back through the thoughts and the comments. What does this person spend their time thinking about? Let me give you some examples, right? So if we're dealing with a person who constantly, or even mostly, even if you don't want to say constant, mostly has something to say about how other people dress, right? It's always some sort of put down or some sort of judgment or whatever. Why is that person wearing that? They look so stupid. Right? Little side comments, just little snippets, right? Just nit, 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 right? I mean, we can conclude quite a few things about this if you know what to look for. This is a person who's not happy with themselves. They judge the crap out of themselves, and they judge everything that they do, everything that they wear, where they're at, where they're not, etc. And again, rather than facing that and working on it, they project. They project. And so, once again, what is that going to show you? It's only going to emphasize further, because your perspective, your view, the things that you see are about focusing on what other people are doing and what they're wearing. So what are you going to see more of? You're going to see it because you're looking for it. Anything that doesn't fit into your idea of what's attractive, you're going to pick at it. And this is what's interesting. When it comes to astrology, I like to add this in, as you know, but as in astrology, whatever signs and elements or whatever, especially signs, you have in areas that have to do with creative expression or beauty or how you show yourself. So another person or other people who don't have similar placements as you, right? Maybe they're opposing. Maybe they don't have any crossover points whatsoever. So this person's self-expression is going to be very different to yours. Now, does that mean that what they're wearing or what they're doing is not attractive? It might not be attractive to you because you've got, signs that are not compatible, and it wouldn't be something you would wear. But if that person likes that, that's part of their self-expression. What's the problem? It doesn't affect you at all. So why are you focusing on it, right? And again, this just creates a trap. It's a loop. Now you're stuck. And all you're going to do is focus on what other people are doing and what they're wearing and calling it out, making comments and all the rest of it, when all it does is highlight your own insecurities about yourself. Now, are you getting anywhere with that? No, of course not. You're just going around in circles and focusing on things that aren't important. It doesn't matter what another person wears. Do you have to wear it? No. Can you wear what you want? Yes. If you don't like what you're wearing, should you maybe change it to something you do like? Yes. Yes. If that became clear, obvious, and you got over it and moved on, it's very easy then for you to focus, because now you've got more energy to put into something you do want. So this is my point. The reason why I went through this entire long spiel, just to give you an example. The more time you spend thinking about things that you don't like, that don't lead you to your purpose or your plans or to making, you being happy or whatever, right? The more time you spend doing that, the less time and energy you have available per day to be focusing on the things that you should be focusing on. And this is an important connection to make in terms of the universe, in terms of interacting with other people. Now imagine if more of us stopped focusing on what other people are doing and us calling out what they're doing or what they're wearing or how they're acting or whatever, and we focused more on our introspection, right? On improving ourselves, making connections within ourselves, understanding who we are, what we're doing, etc., etc., right? Think of the things and the lives that we would create based on this simple shift and practice and focus. I personally think there'd be a lot more acceptance of ourselves and of others. There'd be a lot more patience and tolerance, forgiveness, and care and love, right? And because of that, we give that gift to ourselves. We then have that gift to extend to others. And this is why I say it's so important not to focus on what you don't want. Number one, it makes you miserable. You cannot change what other people do. You can't change what they think. There's no power there. None. You just frustrate yourself for nothing. And then you get nowhere. It's not worth it. And there's no power there. The power exists inside of you, focusing on what it is that you do want and working on how to get it. That's where the power is. That's where you achieve what you want. So I wanted to talk about this because I think it's an important thing. I see it constantly online. I see it in person. I see it everywhere. People spend far too much time, and I'm only putting this forward to get you to think. Personally, I don't care what other people wear, right? I don't really care. If that person's comfortable with it and it makes them happy, then by all means. Obviously, I have my own personal views. Everybody does, right? Like for me, myself, I would never get any kind of, fillers or plastic surgery or whatever that stuff is. I wouldn't, for myself, I wouldn't do it, right? I don't like it. Am I going to spend all of my time stressing out about it? No. And if I was, I'd be thinking maybe I need to do it then, because if I'm thinking about it all the time, I clearly need to do something. And again, when I talk about this, there's a lot of pressure and, on society and looking a certain way and whatever, and we're starting to see the cracks of that. This idea of eternal youth, or appearing to be, because this is where it gets interesting, and I might talk about this in another video. I love talking about longevity. Now, when you actually incorporate longevity practices in your life, calmness, less stress, etc., you do tend to look younger. You do look better. Does that mean you're going to look exactly like how somebody else wants you to look? No, but like I said, it doesn't matter. So we have to think about these things. I will do a video on longevity. I'll do a bunch because it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite topics. But I just wanted to bring this point up in how important it is, because it just doesn't matter. Focus on what you're needing to be doing and improving your life, not what other people are doing and how you think they should improve their life.